my great pleasure to introduce our first speaker of the day, Natalie Logan MacLean. Natalie is the CEO of Sisco, and Sisco has been developing and delivering recovery initiatives within the Scottish Prison Service for the last 5 years. She and her team and her volunteers are fierce advocates of community, and they will be the lead partner in delivering the follow-up program for 12 weeks that comes after the sessions in the prisons. And Natalie is fed up. Natalie is tired of us worrying about opening the can of worms. And what she is going to do is tell us why we should instead get busy nurturing those worms. Clap again.
I'm nervous because today I speak to you with not my words. It's the words of the men that's still trapped inside the walls of prison. I think it's only polite to start off by thanking everyone that made this vision possible. James Docherty, my friend, my guru, created the vision. The tenacity of Ian Smith for reaching out to Fritzy and her team. The bravery for the guys at Sisco, and to Pauline Scott, Julie and Laura, and all the team at Tigers, Ace Aware Nation and Suzanne Dyke that's pulled this event together today, because it's not took us a long time, we've done this in a matter of weeks. A very, very special thanks to the Scottish Prison Service and the brilliant staff that value the work that Sisco have allowed us to bring into the establishments. They have allowed us to deliver a radical, brave, and new approach to how we see trauma. Thank you to all the officers that have came today. We don't only have officers in the room. We have 3 of my prisoners for Berlin present in this room to hear how they can heal. That's the most special thing for me. To my board and my own team that have broken down barriers and faced their own past traumas throughout this process, I salute your bravery. To Gary Fraser at Gaff Media for giving your time, filming this project for educational purposes, thank you, Gary. Finally, to the most important people in my life here today. My mum, who taught me independence, courage, and bravery. And to my son, who taught me unconditional love for the first time. And my husband, for not abandoning me in my times of trauma. The journey we've been on for the past 2 weeks with Fritzy and her team has been an honour and a privilege. We laughed, we cried, we pretty much went on a roller coaster. We witnessed extreme levels of vulnerability, and the pain of others' trauma created a cathartic environment, allowing the voices of those still suffering not only to be heard, but to be validated. In summary, what we witnessed was 3 environments, often defined as desensitised, become emotionally regulated and present. During the process of setting up this project, we have witnessed so much resistance. From the systems, from psychology teams, and the ethos and concerns raised were that Sisco didn't fall in line with the Scottish Government's trauma framework, and the work we proposed potentially could open up a can of worms for those attending the project. Why would you assume that by exploring trauma that we're opening a can of worms? Newsflash. If you don't comprehend the worms are eating us alive, for the inside out, hence our behaviours, then I suggest that it's not us that should reevaluate the trauma-informed system we operate under. I suggest it's you. In February this year, the Scottish Government published the Vision for Justice publication, and the article highlighted the following: person-centred and trauma-informed approach. We have an effective, modern and person-centred approach to justice in which everyone can have trust, including victims, those accused of committing crimes, and individuals in civil disputes. Our only aim throughout this project was to listen to those who have been silenced their whole life and give them a platform to face their past and create a brighter and better future. So to give context to how these men feel, it is my absolute honour to read out their voice. So let me begin. I have changed the names to keep anonymity of these men's stories. If you have tissues, now would be the time to get them ready. Ross, trauma in me. I've experienced a lot of trauma in my life. One of the worst things happened to me when I was serving 5 years in HMP Kilmarnock. It was exactly 1 week before Christmas. I was called into the hall manager's office and told that my partner, who I had been with for 6 years and had 2 young children with, had passed away to a suspected drug overdose. This absolutely floored me, as you can imagine. And to make matters worse, 2 weeks later, I was called into the same hall manager's office to now be told my father had passed away. The next 6 months were a blur. I took this bad, and it's because of that I first started to use heroin. To this day, I've never dealt with the emotional pain, I've never dealt with the death, and I still struggle and battle with an opiate addiction, which after 14 years, I'm only starting to address thanks to the help and support of Sisco. David. Trauma is something that has been part of my life since early years, but I didn't know it until I got into recovery. It was as little as hearing my parents argue to being involved in violence. I was bullied, I was tortured, and I was touched up by my teacher as a young boy at school. It can be as little as big as what I've just wrote, but I do believe it's been the main factor to me abusing drugs in my life to date. Who was I to turn to, and who would actually listen? I knew very little about trauma until I got into recovery. I went to a conference with Gabor Mate, and from there I learned more and more that what had happened in my past didn't define me, and that I could reshape my future. Today I'm learning I can let go of my trauma. The next one that I'm going to read is from somebody that's really special to me. Sean Toll was the man that helped me create the model that would be Sisco. He was the prisoner that sat with me in HMP Berlin, going over all different scenarios about how we could create something different within the walls of HMP Berlin. He's an absolute ambassador for what we are trying to do. He was an innocent man that served a long time in prison, but he got a degree. This is Sean's words. My life was turned upside down in 2005 when I was convicted of a murder I did not commit. Taking the innocent aspect away and looking at my time as a prisoner, it can be hard to reflect on the time while I was incarcerated. This can cause unwelcome feelings and emotions just thinking about it. Whilst in prison as an individual, I was stripped of my identity, freedom, and life as I knew it in a heartbeat. I'm not justifying crime or looking for sympathy, as unfortunately a boy lost his life in the incident I was convicted of. I spent 15 years in prison, basically half of my conscious life and more of my adult life than I've spent outside. And I witnessed a variety of traumatising incidents. The undercurrent of violence, drug abuse, mental health issues, and lack of trust sets you up for horrible times, leaving unseen wounds under the surface. These wounds aren't just painful as physical wounds, it's more. And unlike physical wounds, they cannot be seen to the naked eye. We begin to work around the wounds, trying to navigate a minefield in our hearts and hide these invisible wounds, causing all sorts of mental health problems. The prison environment is a perfect condition for a traumatised soul to be produced. How true is that? The whole system is based on a lack of trust. The prisoners don't trust the staff don't trust the prisoners, so how can anyone heal in these conditions? Not all staff are trauma-informed in any way, shape or form, and a huge lack of empathy exists among staff, and vice versa. It plays as cons don't have empathy or respect for staff either, again creating a perfect environment for mental health problems. This is not to take away from anything from the staff or to disrespect them, as there are good members of staff with good intentions, but unfortunately they meet a brick wall when they try to implement positive change. I have had first-hand experience of working alongside some of these staff members. These mental health problems manifest and become extremely hard to deal with, which in turn precedes and produces self-medication, which in turn turns into addiction. These dots are not hard to match up, but sheer lack of awareness on both sides and the lack of empathy on both sides creates a toxic environment, which produces lost soul after lost soul. Staff members are conditioned just as much as prisoners, which is obviously counterproductive to any of the healing process. They're trapped within their policies. That is not to say that I have the answers to this conundrum, as I don't, but it's clear that these conditions don't work with the drug death statistics and the reoffending rate. Surely these stats are enough to try a different approach at least. The punitive approach has been tried and tested over and over again, but we appear with the same result. Some say going over and over the same issue and hoping for a different and more positive outcome is the definition of insanity. An example of this can be seen at the top-end condition within the prison system. The job at top end is for staff and prisoners to work alongside each other to get ready for reintegration back into society. The success rate for this is extremely low, and I can only say this through my experience watching the amount of people being downgraded. If any business in the world was working with this success rate, it would surely fail. Staff would be sacked and a new system would be put in place. But the rigid framework within the prison system only makes for lies upon lies from prisoners' point of view and staff who know they're being lied to but can't do anything as they have to follow a certain protocol. This again is so draining and counterproductive on both sides and has no positive outcome whatsoever. My personal experience of the system has caused deep infected wounds in my soul, which have a brick wall around them, thicker than the Great Wall of China. I cannot stress how bad my experience was. My time in prison, I have seen countless incidents of violence, was involved in violent incidents, and exposed daily to potential threats of violence. The desperation of people to block out the trauma is hard to watch as they take substances like spice and atisalam, substances everyone knows are deadly, and other risky substances, and will do anything simply just to block out their day. I was asked to stay away from bad influences and criminals within prison. This is a statement I couldn't get my head around. In top end and open conditions, they tell you not to associate with known criminals, and when you ask the question, why is there anyone here who would be a bad influence? Why are these bad influences? If I need to watch who I'm surrounding myself with, why would it be good for clarity? But I was told to shut up, stop causing problems, and do it, or you'll be downgraded. A perfectly simple and logical question, but what better way to frighten you and cause anxiety than to dangle your freedom in front of your very face? Top-end conditions are supposed to be full of people who have been extensively checked by social work, inside and outside the prison, staff and psychology. These type of things could make you reclusive and would challenge you on the lack of interaction. A constant challenge on how you conducted yourself and who you surrounded yourself with for no apparent reason. In top-end conditions, you're not supposed to question the authority, even if it's nonsense or illogical. These are the types of incidents which create distrust, and distrust manifests. Instantly devaluing your self-worth, causing hatred, bitterness, resentment, anxiety, depression, and a distrust to the system. Within the prison setting, I was never able to be myself and had a very different mask for different situations. This is also confusing to the psyche and has a lasting effect once released, as you battle to find your true self again. The level of bad behaviour, violence and traumatic events that occurred whilst in prison completely desensitises you, and this is blatantly obvious upon release, as you find yourself talking about stuff which is nothing to you whilst you can see your family, loved ones, or even just friends and people around you. The normalisation of traumatic events has hardened my interior and left wounds so deep that I don't even see them until they're pointed out to me. I can feel them and know they're there, but the fogginess within my mind doesn't allow me to see the forest for the trees. I'm lucky to have an extensive support network. I struggle with my emotions and feelings at times, so I can't begin to imagine how most of the guys who have less support than me feel when they're released from prison. I struggle to see why people do not get that these traumatised souls just go right back into their chaotic lives when they're being released. It's so logical for it to happen, and it upsets me to know that people are going through this trauma on a daily basis and no real awareness or knowledge of why they do what they do or make the mistakes they make. I've been out for 2 years now and I've done well to reintegrate back into society, but I still have days where I'm debilitated for no good reason. This can manifest as anxiety, depression, disassociation, or just overall distancing myself from my true love and my loved ones. I hate that this happens, and it causes me a lot of grief trying to work out a problem that just can't be worked out. This is trauma, and this is a destructive pain. This is the depths of the invisible wounds when you cannot explain or understand what is wrong with you, or what is wrong with who you are. The ripple effects make your loved ones think they can't help you. Prison is a war zone at times, physically and mentally, and trauma is the root cause in my time. I was never informed about ACE's dual diagnosis or a potential health approach to substance abuse. This was until the Recovery Cafe and HMP Berlin came along, which was a great way of informing prisoners and allowing a safe place for people to talk. But this also opened my eyes to what I knew already was a problem and to an epidemic there can be no other words for. The trauma I see in each and every individual was a single factor that brought us all together and was the single factor of the cause of the negative issues as a prisoner. Trauma causes mental health problems, and mental health problems causes addiction. An easy equation, you would think, but no dual diagnosis is a phrase that seems to scare the system. We need to move away from a punitive approach and adopt a better healthcare approach. Even though everyone knows this is the correct way to move forward, the public are misinformed because of newspapers, bad media coverage, which only allows room for a punitive approach by MPs, the system, and policymakers. Those who enforce the law on a damaged, demonised, and simply unwell minority. This approach will never change the individuals in question. You can't punish trauma out of someone. This, as I say, with a degree of certainty, and I can also say with the same degree of certainty that the same equation of trauma equals mental health issues, addiction. Dual diagnosis is the single most damaging issue within our prisons. I would like to leave it with a poem which was written by Judge Dennis Shalin in the US. We want them to have self-worth, so we destroy their self-worth. We want them to be responsible, so we take away their responsibility. We want them to be positive and constructive, so we degrade them and make them feel useless. We want them to be trustworthy, so we put them in a place where there is no trust. We want them to quit exploiting us, so we put them where they can exploit each other. We want them to take control of their lives, problems, and quit being a parasite on us, so they make us dependent on our system. We want them to be non-violent, so we put them where violence is all around them. We want them to be kind and loving people, so we subject them to hatred and cruelty. We want them to quit being the tough guy, so we put them where the tough guy is respected. We want them to quit hanging around with losers, so we put all the losers under the same roof. This sums up prison life. How can we heal in these confusing and traumatizing conditions? And that was from Sean Toll. I did ask you to get your tissues out because the hard one is going to be the most difficult. And I will run out the back door, so I apologise as soon as I finish this. The name has been changed. This is John's story. They stole my sleep. I still haven't got it back. What's poverty? What's mental health? Then there's the addiction bit. So here I go. A long time ago I came into this world. I didn't know we had nothing because the surrounding area I was in was chaotic, and you were just told to shut up, get a ball. Then one day my ball burst, and my world would collapse. My ma met a new man and would go to the pub with him most nights. He was a bastard to all of us, my whole life. I had 2 babysitters who I thought were like my aunties. But then my aunties became doctors and nurses, and they became mummies and daddies. And other stuff at that time that I thought were just games. Then one day, they were gone. I hated my ma so much, and I blamed her for taking away the 2 people that I thought loved me and that were playing games with me. I became confused, angry, hurting, sad, and my behaviour eventually got me put into care. Aye, right. They made my life harder. And when the shame deepened, I turned to glue, gas, and all other nasty stuff. When I was put into care, there was no coming back. They fucking tortured me. And the other wee boys. They made us strip in the morning to see who had pissed or shit their pants. And see when the dirty old and young men came in during the night, even little kids with a tiny little skid mark would get beaten black and blue, and then the bad stuff. Then they sent me home for secondary school. Fuck that. I'm not trusting anyone. Teachers didn't believe me. I didn't have somebody that I could say, please help me. And when I tried, I was told, shut up. Just start behaving yourself. Aye, right. You were the ones that made my life harder. Then society criticised me for my choices because of the pain that I had been in for just a wee boy. It started with glue, gas, pills, wine, dry stuff, hard stuff, soft stuff, wet stuff, didn't matter. My attitude, all right then, come on you bastards. And it did come on. Jails, institutions, not the best places. Yeah, well, you would think that. After being out some time, I realised that's where I was safe, in prison. I was fed, I was watered, I had friends, and I had 3 meals a day. I didn't do a lot of big sentences, but met real, genuine people during my time in jail that I could not only relate to, but they could also relate to me. I'm older now, and I haven't been in jail for quite some time, but I'm still a hurt wee boy that's forever trying to find peace. I'm fortunate to have support from my own family and my family at Sisco. I only hope one day I can wake up in the morning and not have to relive my life and all the bad stuff that happened in it. I can only hope one day I don't have to turn to substances to ease the nightmares that I lived every single day as a child when no one there was there to hear my cries. Lots of love to the broken-hearted. You're not alone. The wee man can still hear your silent cries. Thank you.